3 days after my father's stroke, my sister had my name taken off his hospital visitor list. She did not know I had spent 11 months copying every wire she and our family lawyer ran through a company that does not exist. Sabine told the nurses she was protecting him from stress, and she told it so well that the charge nurse who wrote the request down, my roommate for 2 years in college, did not correct her. Priya let me stand at the end of the corridor for a full minute before she said anything. "Your sister cried," she said. "She cried beautifully. She said you upset him and that the doctors agreed, and she used the word volatile twice." I asked if the doctors agreed. Priya looked at the ceiling like she was pricing it. "Dr. Ose has never said the word volatile in his life. He says hypertensive, and then he goes to lunch." I asked how long the list had been changed. "Since 4 this afternoon," along with a request that any documents brought in for signature be witnessed by staff. That last part was the interesting part, and Priya knew it was, which is why she said it slowly. Nobody asks a hospital to witness documents unless documents are coming. At 7:40 that evening they came. Sabine arrived in a gray coat with her hair pinned the way our mother used to pin hers, and behind her came Desmond Pike, who had been our family's lawyer for 26 years, and who carried a slim leather folder the way a waiter carries a check he knows you cannot pay. "Nora," Sabine said, and her eyes went wet on cue, which is a skill, and I have never once seen her fail to land it. "You shouldn't be here." I said I was aware. She said, "Dad needs quiet." I said that a durable power of attorney is not quiet. It is loud. It is the loudest document in the building. And Desmond's chin came up half an inch, which for Desmond is a scream. He said, "It's a housekeeping matter. Your father asked for it before the event." I asked when. He said, "Recently." I said that recently is not a date, and that a signature obtained after a stroke needs a capacity assessment, and that Dr. Ose's team had flagged expressive aphasia in the chart at 10 this morning, which meant my father could understand a question perfectly well and be physically unable to answer it, and that any notary who watched him nod would be signing his own complaint to the board. Desmond's folder stayed shut. Sabine's tears did not stop, because they never do, but they stopped meaning anything, and she pivoted so fast I almost admired it. "Fine," she said, "fine. We'll wait until he can hold a pen. I only wanted this handled so you wouldn't have to do it." Priya at the desk did not look up from her monitor when she said, "I'll note in the chart that the family declined the assessment." Sabine said she had not declined anything. Priya said, "Then I'll note that the family requested one." That was the whole first round, and it took 9 minutes. And it cost my sister a document she had been building toward since the ambulance left our driveway. I want to be clear that I did not feel triumphant. My father was 2 doors away with a line on his arm and his hand curled like a fist he had forgotten to open, and I had just won a small procedural fight over his body. That is not victory. That is triage. People ask why I did not simply call the police in month 2 or month 5, and the answer is boring, which is why nobody in my family believed it. Everything I had was pulled from accounts I could only see because I was an officer of Callahan Industrial, and the settlement my father signed in 2019 when he bought out our cousins came with a confidentiality clause so broad that a lawyer I paid $400 to read it told me I could be sued for describing our org chart at a dinner party. If I had gone to a detective with a folder of internal transfers, the first call that detective would have made was to the company's counsel of record, and the counsel of record was Desmond Pike. I would have handed my evidence to the man it was about. Ruth Adeyemi explained this to me, the way you explain gravity to a person standing on a roof. Ruth is 5 feet tall. She is the only lawyer I have ever met who says I don't know out loud, and I retained her privately in March with money from selling my apartment in Denver, which is a sentence my family would find hilarious if they knew, because they think I sold it because I failed. You have a lot, Ruth told me that spring, spreading my folders across her table. You have almost enough. What you do not have is the moment. Evidence is not a hammer, Nora. It is a key. A key is worthless until there is a lock in front of you and people watching you turn it. I asked how long. She said, until they do something in public they cannot take back. So I waited, and while I waited I kept doing what I have always done, which is label things. My father gave me a label maker when I was 9 for a school project, and I never really put it down. Folders, boxes, the shelf in the garage, the switch panel in the boathouse. Sabine used to peel the labels off and stick them on my bedroom door in the wrong order. And our mother used to laugh and say, "Girls." And that was the extent of the intervention. There is a photograph of my 9th birthday where I am holding the label maker like a trophy, and Sabine is behind me holding a slice of cake she is about to put in my hair, and both of us are smiling, and honestly, both smiles are real. That is the part outsiders never understand. It was not cold the whole time. When our mother died, I was 31 hours late getting home because I was in Denver closing the heroine contract, and Sabine sat with her the entire last night, and she called me from the hallway at 4 in the morning and said, "She asked for you," and then she said, "It's okay, Nor," and she meant it, and for 2 years after that we were closer than we had ever been. I have thought about those 2 years more than I have thought about anything else in my life. I do not think she was lying then. I think she found out later that the thing she had done by accident, being the one who was there, could be done on purpose, and that once you know a thing like that about yourself, you cannot unknow it. By the time I noticed the transfers, in the October before the stroke, she had already been doing it on purpose for a long time. $40,000, then 60, then 110 out of the Callahan Industrial Operating Account and into a vendor called Kestrel Holdings that had a mailing address in a strip mall in Bristol and a website with a stock photograph of a bridge on it. Kestrel invoiced us for consulting. Kestrel had one officer of record. The officer of record was a woman named Elaine Pike, who was 79 years old and who had not left an assisted living facility in Norwalk since 2018, and who was Desmond's mother. The public part started at the March dinner, 6 weeks after the stroke, at the house, with my father home and installed in the study in a hospital bed that faced the window because he had made it very clear with his one good hand that he did not want to face the door. Sabine called it a family meeting, which in our family means an ambush with a serving dish. There were 14 of us. Aunt Marguerite came, which mattered later more than anyone at that table understood. And our cousin Tobias came, who is 34 years old and has been 3 months from getting his life together since the second Obama administration. Sabine stood up between the main course and the pie and said that with Dad's recovery going to take a year or more, and with the spring audit coming, someone had to hold the wheel, and that Desmond had drafted a simple interim authority, and that she had not wanted this, that she had honestly hoped I would step up, but that after everything with the hospital, she felt she had no choice. Then she put her phone in the middle of the table, face up, and let it sit there like a place setting. On the screen was a screenshot of a message I had sent to our head of operations in January that read, in full, "Keep it off the books until I say." 14 people read it. Marguerite said, "Well," Tobias said, "Jesus, Nora." Sabine said nothing at all, which was the smartest thing she did all night. I asked her to scroll up. She said this wasn't the venue. I said it was exactly the venue. She had chosen it. She had set the table. I said the message above, that one was from our head of operations, telling me that a supplier had sent us a Christmas gift of $2,000 in gift cards, which our policy prohibits, and that he wanted to know how to handle it, and my answer was to keep it off the books until I said, meaning until I could get the compliance officer to open a file and log it properly, which happened 4 days later, file number, date, everything, and that I could put the whole thread on this table in 90 seconds if anyone wanted the page instead of the paragraph. Nobody said yes. That is the thing about a room. A room does not want to be corrected, Sabine said, gently. You always have an explanation, and there it was, the actual weapon, the one that works on families, because an explanation sounds like a lie's best friend. So I stopped explaining and I let it sit, and I watched who looked at their plate. 11 of them looked at their plates. Marguerite did not, and Priya's aunt, who cooks for the house on Sundays and had been in the kitchen doorway the whole time, did not. Then Tobias, who had been drinking since 4, decided to be helpful. He came around the table and put his hand flat on my chest and pushed, and I went into the sideboard, and a serving dish that had belonged to my grandmother went onto the floor in 3 pieces, and he said, "You don't talk to her like that in her own house. It was my father's house." That detail did not occur to anyone at the time, but it occurred to the camera above the door, which my father had installed in 2016, and which records to a local drive in the boathouse on a switch panel I had labeled myself when I was 19. Marguerite helped me up. She has a voice like a paper cut, and she used it. "Tobias," she said, "sit down before you inherit something." He sat down. Sabine cried, and I went home with a bruise across my shoulder blade and a piece of my grandmother's dish in my coat pocket, and I texted Ruth 2 words, which were, "It's public." They locked me out on a Tuesday. The email said my access was suspended pending an internal review into irregularities in the operating account, which was, I will admit, a genuinely elegant move, because it meant that when I eventually produced records from that account, the story would already be written for me. She was under investigation, and then suddenly she had documents. Ruth said it was the single most competent thing our opponent had done, and that Desmond had certainly written it. I sat in my car in the parking structure for a while. Then Sabine called me, and she did not scheme, and that is what made it the worst hour of the whole year. She said, "Come to the house, not for them, for me." I went. She had made tea in our mother's pot, which she has never once done for effect because she does not know that I watch for effect, and she sat on the floor with her back against the couch the way she sat when she was 15, and she said, "Do you know what I actually can't forgive?" I said no. She said, You weren't there." She said it without any tears at all, which is how I knew she was not performing. She asked for you at midnight and again at 2, and I said soon, soon. And at 3 I stopped telling her you were coming because it was making her cry. And at 4 I called you and I said it's okay because you were on a plane and there was nothing you could do with the truth. And then you came home and everyone hugged you. Everyone. Because you were the one who missed it. She looked at me. I sat with her while she died, and I got a casserole. I did not have an answer to that. I still do not, entirely. I said the only true thing I had, which was that I have replayed the Hellerin call twice a week for 6 years, and I know exactly which sentence I could have cut to make the earlier flight. She said, "I know." I said, "That doesn't give you the operating account." She stood up. The tea went cold on the table between us, and the version of my sister who had been on the floor went back wherever it goes. And she said, "You always do that. Someone shows you a wound and you show them a ledger." Marguerite found me on the porch afterward, because Marguerite has attended every important moment of this family from a distance of 1 room, and she sat down next to me and did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "She's right that you're a ledger." I said, "Thank you." She said, "I wasn't finished. She's right that you're a ledger, and she is counting on you being ashamed of it. And darling, that is the only thing about you that has ever frightened her. Your mother kept every letter about the estate in a hat box in my attic, because Desmond told her she didn't need to. Would you like the hat box?" I said yes. She said, "It's the blue one. It's labeled. You'd approve." The Callahan Foundation Gala is the 2nd Saturday in May at the house under a tent for the pediatric wing my mother raised money for until the year she died. And there are always about 200 people and always a podium and always a screen behind the podium because my father liked slideshows the way other men like boats. Sabine ran it that year. She had been named interim chair by a board vote of 6-3 in April, and she had spent the month between the vote and the gala being magnificent about it. And she opened the evening with a speech about stewardship and about how the hardest thing about the past year had been discovering that the person you trust most is capable of things you cannot say out loud in a room like this one. 200 people understood exactly who she meant. Then she said, "But tonight is about Mom." And she nodded at the tech kid at the laptop, and the screen behind her filled with a photograph of our mother at the ribbon cutting in 2011, and everyone made the sound rooms make. I was standing near the sound booth with Ruth on one side of me and Marguerite on the other. Ruth had asked me one question in the car, which was whether I wanted to do this in a room with press in it, and I said yes, and she said, "Then you do it in order, and you let them talk in between, and you do not get ahead of the room." I walked up during the applause and asked for the remote, and the tech kid, who was maybe 22, looked at Sabine, and then looked at the laminated run sheet in his hand, and the run sheet said that the next item was a video from the Boathouse Drive, because I had added it that afternoon in my capacity as a member of the foundation board, which nobody had thought to suspend, because the foundation is not the company, and because Desmond Pike, for all his care, had spent 26 years thinking of the foundation as a hobby. The first thing on the screen was the dining room, March 14th, time-stamped, 4 angles, and there was Tobias with his hand on my chest and my grandmother's dish going down, and 200 people watched a man shove a woman into a sideboard in dead silence with no music under it, which is a very different experience from hearing about it. A man near the bar said, "Oh, come on." Somebody's mother said, "That's the row boy." Sabine said into her microphone, "This is a private family matter and this is not the place." And I said, without a microphone, that she had put my private family matter on a table in front of 14 people and called it a meeting. And Marguerite said, at a volume that carried, "She did, you know. I was there. There was pie." The room laughed, and the laugh was the crack in the wall, because once a room laughs at the person at the podium stops working. I did not go to the money next. Ruth had been very firm about that. I went to the visitor list, which was a single page from the hospital's administrative log, requested through counsel, showing the change made at 4:11 on a Thursday afternoon by a person who was not the patient and not the physician, and I read out the reason field, which said, "At family request, minimize stress." Then I put up the same afternoon's chart note recording expressive aphasia. Then I put up the notary's calendar entry from that same evening, which Ruth had subpoenaed in April, showing a house call booked at the hospital for 7:30 in the name of D. Pike. And I said to the room, in the flattest voice I own, that a man who cannot speak had been booked for a signature 90 minutes after his daughter arranged for the only person who would object to be turned away at the door. There was no gasp. Rooms do not gasp. Rooms go quiet in a specific way, a low grinding way, like a machine changing gear. Sabine did what she always does, which is pivot to a new accusation before the last one has landed. And I have to say it was a good one. She said, "You are showing them a lot of paper about a company you have been under investigation by since April." She said, "Tell them why you were locked out. Tell them about the operating account." And I said, "All right," and I put up the operating account. Kestrel Holdings, 22 payments, October through February, $411,000, invoices for strategic consulting, all of them formatted identically, all of them approved under a delegated authority that had exactly 2 holders. Then I put up the strip mall in Bristol, and the stock photograph of the bridge, and then the officer of record, Elaine Pike, and then a photograph Marguerite's driver had taken of the facility in Norwalk where Elaine Pike has lived since 2018. And I said her age out loud, 79, and I said that I had written to her twice through counsel and received 2 replies from Desmond's office, and the room turned, all at once, the way a school of fish turns, and looked at the man standing near the tent pole in the good suit. And Sabine, to her enormous credit, understood in that half-second that the evening had stopped being about her, and she made a choice, and the choice was to say, "I signed those. Desmond told me they were retainers," which was true, and was also the end of her, because the room had just watched her volunteer it. Desmond did not run, he said. "This is a civil matter between shareholders, and it is being litigated in the wrong forum," which is a sentence that is technically correct and sounds, in a tent, exactly like a confession. Marguerite came up the side aisle with the hat box. She is 81 years old, and she carried it like a cake. Inside were 41 letters from Desmond to my mother between 2009 and 2014, and Ruth had spent 3 weeks with them, and the substance of them is that when my grandmother's estate was distributed, there was a category called administrative reserve that Desmond controlled, and that my mother asked about it 4 times in writing, and that the 4th letter contains the sentence, "Dear Colleen, I would prefer you not put questions of this kind in writing." Ruth read that sentence to 200 people in her courtroom voice. Then she said the number, which was $1.2 million across 6 years, and then she said the part that mattered, which was that the administrative reserve had been closed in 2015 and reopened in 2019 under a new name, and that the new name was Kestrel Holdings. My sister had not been the architect. My sister had been the signature. She had spent 1.5 years constructing a story in which I was dangerous, so that when the money surfaced there would already be a place to put it, and she had done that because a man she had known since she was 6 told her, gently, over lunch, that it might come to that. Watching her understand this in real time in front of 200 people, holding a microphone she had not thought to put down, was the single worst thing I have ever enjoyed. The next 11 weeks were paperwork, which is what consequences actually look like when you get close to them. Desmond Pike was suspended by the state bar in June and surrendered his license in September, rather than face the panel, which his own lawyer described in the trade press as a personal decision, and the criminal referral went out in July and is still moving, because these things move like weather. The company clawed back $380,000 from Kestrel through the bond and is chasing the rest. The board of the Callahan Foundation removed its interim chair on a Tuesday morning by unanimous vote, which is a thing I did not enjoy the way I thought I would, and the hospital opened an ethics review into the visitor list change that ended with a written policy requiring physician sign-off. So at least one small permanent good came out of it. 2 corporate sponsors withdrew from the fall campaign, and a 3rd increased its gift, which tells you something about people. Tobias was fired from the warehouse in the first week, not by me, and the assault charge was dropped when I declined to press it. And I want to be honest about why I declined, which is not mercy. It is that his mother is Marguerite's sister, and I decided the cost of that was higher than the pleasure of it, and I made that calculation on paper, and Sabine would say that proves her point about me, and she might be right. Sabine herself was not charged. She cooperated in August, and her lawyer negotiated a settlement in which she repaid $91,000 of the money that had passed through her hands, resigned every position she held, and agreed to a 5-year bar from any officer role in a Callahan entity. She kept her name. She kept the house on Fenn Street. She did not go to prison, and I did not ask for her to. In October, she came to my office without an appointment, and my assistant, who had heard the whole story from the receptionist who had heard it from Priya's aunt, buzzed me and said, in a tone I will treasure, "There is a Miss Callahan here, and she says she is family," and I said I would check. "Thank you for listening to Channel Crystal Novel." She sat down across from me, and she did not cry. And she said, "You've changed." I said, "Probably." She said, "Mom would be sick about this." I said, "Mom wrote 4 letters asking where the money went, and got told not to put it in writing, and that whatever Mom would be sick about, it was not the letters coming out of the attic." She said, "You could have come to me, privately, in October, when you first saw it. You could have knocked on my door and said, 'Sabine, what is Kestrel?' and I would have told you Desmond said it was retainers, and none of this would have happened." And that is the part one have thought about the most, because it might even be true. I told her the truth, which is that in October I had already been to her privately about 3 smaller things over 4 years, and each time what came back to me a week later was a story about my temper, told at a dinner I was not at. I said, I stopped knocking because I could hear what happened to the knocking. She said, so this is my fault. I said, no. I said, it's yours. That's a different word. She sat with that. Then she said, are you ever going to forgive me? And she asked it as a real question, not as a lever. And I told her the only honest thing I had, which was that forgiveness was not the shape of what I owed her, that we were going to be two women at the same funerals for the next 40 years, that I would be civil in every room and generous in every emergency, and that she should not mistake either of those things for the door being open. Then I said her name, and I said, Dad asks for you, because he does. He got most of his speech back by August in a slow, gravelly version that he hates, and in September he sat in the study facing the window and worked out, over about 4 minutes, that what he wanted to say to me was, you kept the receipts, and then he laughed, which sounds like a door dragging, and he pointed at the label maker on the shelf, the one from when I was 9, which Marguerite had dug out of the boathouse and put back on his desk with a gold star sticker on the side, because when I was small he put a gold star on every report I labeled properly, and Sabine used to peel them off and stick them on my bedroom door in the wrong order. On Thanksgiving there were 9 of us at the table. Ruth came, and Marguerite came and told a story about the hat box for 11 minutes that got longer and better every time, and Priya came with her aunt, who cooked and who refused to let anyone help. Sabine did not come. She sent a text at 3 in the afternoon that said, tell Dad I made the sweet potato thing. It's on the porch, and it was good, and we ate it, and nobody made a speech about it. And in the spring at the Gala, a woman from the pediatric wing came up to me at the podium with a clipboard and a stack of donor folders and asked, very seriously, how I wanted them organized, and Marguerite, from her chair in the front row, without turning her head, said, folder 7, darling. She'll want folder 7. And I did want folder 7. It is where I keep the things that are finished. I put my mother's 4 letters in it in June, and I have not opened it since, and I do not need to, because I know exactly what is in there and exactly where it is, which is the entire point of a label, and which is the one thing my family never understood about me. I was not keeping receipts because I expected to need them. I was keeping them because someone in a house full of stories has to be able to say what actually happened, and if you wait until you need that person to become one, you are already 11 months too late. So here is what I want to know from you, because you have been sitting with this the whole way, and you have an opinion. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next